Hey guys, Brian here with the Destiny Council, here with another deck tech video for you guys. Today we're going to be talking about the infamous, the notorious R2P2 Ray Poe from the two-player starter decks. Now this deck is nothing new. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it. It's been winning multiple regionals and been doing really well on the casual level as well. Now, before we go into the deck, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the characters and the battlefield choice. So, what makes R2P2 so great? Now, first off, you start off with 22 health, which in itself is a really good start. The fact that it's very hard to decide who to go for in this matchup. Now, if you go for Ray, you feel bad because her dice are worse. But if you go for Poe first, you feel bad because the pinging with Ray adds up a lot of damage over time. So no matter who you go for, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. And you as the player can take advantage of that and kind of adapt each game to depending on what your opponents decide to do and who they decide to go for. Now, another thing that makes this deck really good is that the blue-red hero suite, in terms of upgrades and events, are really good. We've seen this from set 1 with OG Poe deck, with field medic, defensive position, cards I'll get to later. These cards have been really good for a long time, and the combination of red and blue with hero has brought a lot of good benefits. So those are the characters. Like I said, Ray's dice aren't the best. She's got a 1 damage, a 2 damage, and the resource side, those are her 3 best sides, I'd say. And then Poe, his dice are amazing. He's got the 2 damage, the 2 focus, and then he's got this little hidden special, which can be used for mitigation, as well as triggering Ray's ability, and it can be comboed with other upgrades that have specials on it to do like instant focus and resolves. So all in all, these 2 characters have a lot of good value, and as evidence shows, it's been a really good deck. So those are the characters. Now I wanted to briefly talk about the battlefield. So obviously, in most of the decks you probably see from tournament deck lists, they'll be running Docking Bay, and Docking Bay is used mainly so that if your opponent decides to choose your battlefield, then they're giving you a lot of value with things like Honor Guard and maybe Binds All Things, but letting you get looping Honor Guard over and over and over can be really detrimental to their game. So you want them to be scared of picking Docking Bay, because ultimately you want those shields to start off the game so you can activate Ray, get that free damage. So picking a battlefield that's really threatening really allows you to get that 2 shields to start the game more often. Now some alternatives that we thought of maybe using would be Emperor's Throne Room. Emperor's Throne Room has been a really good battlefield for a long time. You can use it with a lot of good upgrades, and even Poe himself, though it's not as reliable. You have to draw the right upgrades, your handcrafted light bows, your Poe's blaster. Now if you don't draw those and your opponent's running, Kylo Vader, they can utilize this battlefield to their own advantage and leave you in a bad situation. So it's a risky pick, but if you tailor your deck around it, you could potentially run it. And then the other option would be Secret Facility. It's just one of those battlefields you resolve up to 3 of your dice showing damage, range or melees, helps you speed up your claim, but it doesn't in itself give you much inherent bonuses. So a lot of opponents won't mind giving you this battlefield, which kind of goes against what you want. So I thought I'd briefly touch on some other options, but for this deck we're going to be talking about Docking Bay, and we're going to be building a deck that revolves around Docking Bay and lets you utilize it. First, we'll go with the core upgrades that you'll want to use in this deck. Now, everyone's favorite upgrade, Shoto Lightsaber. Now, Shoto Lightsaber it's been in the meta now since pretty much Qui-Gon Kanan, and it's now gone around in pretty much almost every blue weapon deck. It's so good, it provides you shields, it's got a really good dice side in itself. There's not much to talk about there. Now another upgrade, because you're running Rey, you'll want to run 2 of the Rey's lightsabers. Now Rey's lightsaber provides a lot of value in the fact that you just get 2 shields when you play it. So that in itself is essentially like paying 1 resource to get 2 shields. So in 1 card, you get a 3-cost upgrade and a free 2 shields. That is insane. It has redeploy. There's not much else to talk about. This card's really good. If you're running Rey, this card's insane. Now to counter kind of the meta with shields, Qui-Gon Kanan, other R2P2 decks, you'll want to run 2 handcrafted light bows. These go really well with the synergy with Poe's special. Allows you to turn his special and then turn the light bow special for the instant 3 damage or remove all shields in 2. So it's really good against a lot of matchups right now. Palpatine, like I said, Qui-Gon Kanan, R2P2. So really one of the best 3-cost upgrades right now. Another upgrade that's a bit more, I'd say more in the optional slot, which most people would be surprised about, is your Ancient Sabers. Ancient Sabers work really well with your Shoto lightsabers, but in this deck they're not necessarily, the best, because you got mixed damage with Poe, and you might not be able to utilize the +3 side as often as maybe Qui-Gon Kanan would, and you don't have that instant focus into +3 to resolve like you did with Kanan. So I personally run 2 Ancient Lightsabers, but I could see a case for not running them. Like I said, you want to trigger your Shoto Sabers as soon as possible, and it's one of the best upgrades right now in general, even if it isn't a fully melee deck. Continuing with some of the other upgrades in the blue side, we have your regular lightsaber. So I included regular lightsabers in this list because 1, you want redeploys. You have a lot of non-redeployable weapons in this deck, and if you ever do lose one of your characters, you want to leave yourself in a good situation so that you just don't instantly lose the game. Once again, you can also do Poe's special to special with lightsaber, making it a really solid choice. Similar to lightsaber, like I said, this is one of the best upgrades in the game right now, especially on Poe, and that's Poe's Blaster. Now Poe's Blaster's got a 2-side, a +2 side, and his special on Poe deals 3 damage, giving it 3 damage sides on a 2-cost upgrade. There's pretty much no better 2-cost upgrade in the game. And even though we're running a mixed damage deck, the fact that you can do special to special and a lot of focus sides in the deck, you really be hard not to run this card. So, and then like I said, you can overwrite the Poe's Blaster if Poe's about to die for a lightsaber, or maybe even a raised lightsaber in a sticky situation. And then lastly, for the upgrades, I'd like to talk about Jedi Robes. Jedi Robes is just one of those cards that helps you get to your late game, your mid game. This deck's all about playing upgrades and continuing to get more advantage off of each upgrade you play. So Jedi Robes giving you those 2 shields. It also combos with Rey's ability. You stick Jedi Robes on her, and then you get to activate Rey, get the free damage off of her. So not only do you get the free 2 shields, and then you're going to override into one of your other upgrades, but you also get the 1 damage from Rey. The only other upgrade that I didn't talk about, it's not really an upgrade, but is Force Illusion. I go back and forth with Force Illusion. It's a really good card, but a lot of times you don't always have that extra upgraded slot available to play Force Illusion. I find that you also don't want to always mill X amount of cards off the top of your deck. Maybe you're worried that you're going to mill one of your Shoto lightsabers. So, I don't know. I go back and forth with Force Illusion. It's definitely a card that I could see going in the deck, but you'll have to figure out on your own whether or not it fits your personal build. Total, this is, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. 16 upgrades. Now, I typically recommend no more than 14 upgrades in this deck. So, any combination of the sorts, maybe even trimming it down less than 14. But these are the main upgrades I think you'd want to take a look at. Now, before we go into the events, let's go into the supports. Because the whole reason we're running Docking Bay in the first place is so we can get these supports going. And the supports that you're definitely going to be running are Honor Guard. So Honor Guard by itself isn't that amazing. For heroes, it's a pretty solid removal card. Discard the support to remove a die showing range or melee damage. So one, this has to be on the field already. You have to spend that action in advance to play the Honor Guard. Then you have to take another action to remove the Honor Guard to get rid of a die. It takes 2 actions to remove a die, and it can be very counterintuitive to your being able to go fast. But with Docking Bay, it really shines with being able to play it from your discard pile for free and getting that removal over and over again, and that's where it really shines. So we'll be running 2 of those. Another support that really shines in this deck is C3PO. C3PO, plain and simple, you run him, you'll roll out his die, and you can automatically activate any one of your special sides on your dice. So you remove C3PO's die, you activate Light Bow's special, you activate Lightsaber special, you activate Poe special. It's really good for consistency, getting, turning maybe Poe's 2 focus side into a 2 damage side, and then the additional fact of being able to play it for free with Docking Bay. 2 other supports that may or may not make the list or make the cut is Its Binds All Things. Now, normally Its Binds All Things is really outclassed simply by other resource generating cards, and a lot of times you don't want to run this card because if you draw it late, you just don't get enough value out of it to even put it out or pay that resource in the first place. So a lot of times you'll find this card being really dead later in the games. So you'll want to draw it early, and if you don't, you can find yourself stuck with it at the end of the game. Some alternatives to Its Binds All Things would be running Reaping the Crystal. So Reaping the Crystal essentially does the same thing as Its Binds All Things, but you can do that turn 1 play with Reaping the Crystal into Lightsaber, Handcrafted Lipo, or Raise Lightsaber. Now, you don't get to use it with the Docking Bay and continually to loop it, but it does give you that some resource generation on the deck, so you can reliably play some of your 3-cost upgrades. So those are your supports. Now we'll get into the mitigation, removal, and event suite. Now, unlike Qui-Gon Canon, the focus with events for R2P2 are solely pretty much to keep your characters alive. So you'll see, just like Qui-Gon Canon, you'll run Caution. Caution 0 for 3 shields, just to remove maybe a blank side on your dice or one of the bad sides on Rey. It's a really good card for 0. You'll run cards like Field Medic. Field Medic is the pretty much OG original removal, semi-removal, healing 2 for 1, gets around, unblockable damage. So even if they are running a lot of unblockable damage, Field Medic will help for that. 2 for 1 is pretty much the gold standard. Now, another 0-cost card, Guard. Even though you're not running 2 melee characters, Most of your upgrades in the deck have melee sides, so I typically run one just because you can't always rely on having the melee sides up, but guard does allow for you to get some free removal, some semi he doesn't like you plays, or some maybe more value with the +3 side on Ancient Saber and so forth. Another card, which is a really big blowout card for Hero Red, is Defensive Position. Defensive Position is one of those, if you have the battlefield and you have this card in your hand, you feel really safe. It can be a really blowout turn for you, where your opponent rolls out maybe Palpatine, gets 2 shields and 3 range damage. You play Defensive Position, remove both of his dice. It's just a really strong card, but you can't always reliably claim the battlefield with this deck. So I typically only run one, so you don't clog up your hands with cards you can't play. Some other zero-cost survival cards are Spirit of Rebellion. Now 0 for 1 shield isn't that exciting. We always had Take Cover. Now 0 for 2 shields, that's a little bit more tempting to play. So Spirit of Rebellion is just another card that not only does it give you survivability, but you can also trigger Ray's ability. I really like it a lot, and after a lot of testing, I could see it fighting its way into a lot of people's list. Some other removal cards that I'm running are things like Deflect. Deflect is one of those cards that, in the right matchups, it is insane, and when the wrong matchup, it's terrible. So, really hit or miss if your opponent's playing an all melee deck like Qui-Gon Kanan. You're really not happy with having a Deflect in your deck. But more often than not, especially against Palpatine, you can get huge value out of Deflect, and it's worth at least running one, depending on your meta. If you're seeing a lot of melee decks, then obviously you don't want to run it. You'd maybe run something like Force Misdirection. Force Misdirection is a lot better into melee decks because this deck doesn't run blue range sides. So other than, I guess, maybe the handcrafted light bow. But if you're seeing a lot of Qui-Gon Kanan, a lot of all melee decks, I could definitely see Force Misdirection in your deck, maybe over Deflect or in addition. And another card I didn't talk about was Sound the Alarm. Sound the Alarm is one of those cards that everybody's been raving about recently. It's really good sometimes, but not always. There's those times when you play Sound the Alarm and they reroll back into the same amount of damage they had, and there's times when you play Sound the Alarm and they get better than what they had. I've been on all ends of the spectrum, Sound the Alarm and they roll into no damage, and then Sound the Alarm into they just God roll me. So I think Sound the Alarm kind of fits in the similar role spot as Spirit of Rebellion, so I could see running either of those in that spot, depending on what you like more. And then the last card I wanted to talk about was Riposte. Riposte is a card I go back and forth with this deck. On one hand, it can really finish off an opponent's character out of nowhere. They might be on, 5 health left, and you've got 3 shields on, so you really try to squeak out 2 more damage and then go for a sneaky Riposte play. And that might really seal the deal for your opponent. But more often than not, I see that I don't want to play this card. My opponent will, I'll be trying to keep a character alive with shields, not trying to get rid of them. Although I could see some certain scenarios where my opponent's playing handcrafted light bow, and they're going to remove my shields anyway, so I might as well get some damage out of them. So certainly I would try it out some more and see how it tests. But ultimately, these are all the cards that I've considered when making the deck. I'll clean up here and show you some of the core cards, and then let you decide for yourself what to fill in the gaps with. And this is really the core of the deck. These upgrades, these events, and these supports. Now, obviously, you want to run either Binds All Things or Reaping the Crystal, depending on your build, depending on how many 3-cost upgrades you have in your deck. I can see the case for either, but you do need some sort of resource generation in this deck, otherwise you'll fall behind a lot. So, plain and simple, it's a lot easier of a deck to play than most. Your goal for this deck is just to play upgrades. Spend your money on upgrades. Every turn you want to be playing an upgrade for the first, 3 or 4 turns. You really don't want to be spending any of your resources on anything else. So you really want to get cards like Caution and Guard, and that's why I included things like Sound the Alarm and Spirit of Rebellion, because you really want to be playing upgrades with your resources, continuing to get more and more advantage from these cards and doing more damage. But at the same time, you need to make sure your characters don't die. One of your characters dying early is one of the best ways to counter this deck, because your deck's a little bit slow to get started. It doesn't have the best damage out the gate. So if you can survive to the turn 4, turn 5, when you have 3 or 4 upgrades, you're in a really good situation for yourself. It's a really simple deck to play. You want to play your upgrades, roll out, do damage, mitigate damage as much as possible, and then claim to get your stuff like Honor Guard, C3PO out for free, conserving your resources for more upgrades on later turns. Now, in terms of matchups, it really struggles with high amounts of burst damage early. So things like Palpatine, Sabine Ezra, and then the off chance of Qui-Gon Kanan getting early damage. Now, another thing is that you can kind of get out-ramped by decks like the 5-die Villain. So you need to keep pace with them, making sure they aren't getting too ahead of you. Because if you're just sitting back, turtling up, and they're getting off logistics, multiple upgrades a turn, then you could find yourself in a bad situation. So overall, this deck has no real bad matchups, like I said, other than maybe Palpatine, and you can help that with putting in things like Deflect. It's a really simple deck to play, and I'd suggest, if you're new to the game or looking to try something different, give this deck a try. It's a lot of fun. Be sure to check out some of our gameplay videos where we play this deck against a lot of other decks in the field, so you can see kind of how we play the deck, maybe get some ideas on cards you'd like to see. I know there are some cards that I didn't mention in this video, things like maybe All In. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try them. So if you find something that you'd like in the deck that we didn't mention, be sure to leave a comment down below. And like I said, check out our gameplay videos. And until next time, we'll see you later here on the Destiny Council. See you later.